It's cold. Better take your sweater, your favorite one, the one you value most. What is it about that sweater that draws you to it time and again? Its warmth, the quality materials, classic design, or the superb fit and finish? It's all of these things and something else. You value that sweater because the people who made it took pride in it. Take a closer look at that sweater and the people who crafted it, the people who are the Winona Knitting Mills. It was Walker R. Woodworth, the founder of the Winona Knitting Mills, who set forth the company's values and commitment to service. He was born in 1883. Walker left school at an early age and got a job as a warehouse worker when his family fell into financial difficulty. Handling large cases of yarn for the Bemis Burlap Bag Company of Indianapolis, the wages young Walker brought home went to support his family, including an older brother who stayed in school. By the time he was 30, Walker had earned the title of Assistant Production Manager at Bemis. In 1922, when he was 39, Walker moved to Cleveland and soon became plant manager at the rich Sam Plinner Knitting Mills. He had achieved this early success by his hard work, by respecting and helping those around him, and by his constant effort to produce an honest garment. Then, in 1927, Walker went into business with Harry Stone, the head salesman at the Sam Plinner Mill. It was an interesting deal between the two men. Harry Stone had $500 and Walker had a car. In those days, that was considered a pretty good start for a new business, and the Stone Knitting Mill of Cleveland, Ohio was born. In the 40s, with the American involvement in the Second World War in full swing, Walker was given the task of finding a site for another mill. He chose Winona, Minnesota, and the location proved to be ideal. The building itself was originally designed for spinning yarn, but its conversion into a knitting mill was so successful that it still serves as the home plant for the Winona Knitting Mills more than 45 years later. But the real reason that Walker chose Winona was the people. He saw that Winona offered a skilled and eager group of people who were ready to help. He found that his values were shared by the people of Winona. Work hard, produce a quality garment, and deal honestly with the people around you. When the Winona Knitting Mills opened its doors for business in '43, there was only one main customer, Uncle Sam, and it was Army contracts that helped the business get started. Then, suddenly in 1948, Walker Woodworth died. While this was a great shock, it was not as disruptive as it might have been. Marge, Walker's daughter, and his three sons, Walker Jr., John, and Les, had all come to Winona after the war and were in key positions in the plant at the time of Walker's death. Marge was the office manager. She kept the books as well as seeing to the personnel matters. Walker Jr. was in charge of retail sales. John was the plant manager, and he saw that both machines and people got what they needed to produce a quality product. And Les was the president, who coordinated the activities and planned the strategy for the future. Walker Woodworth, as well as being a shrewd businessman, was a pretty good father too, and he imbued his children with his values of hard work, honest dealings, and respect for the people you work with. So the Woodworth family was in an excellent position to continue the strong business started by their father and his partner. However, the Winona Knitting Mills was not owned by the Woodworth family, as Harry Stone still held controlling interest. Naturally, the young Woodworths wanted to buy him out. Here is Les Woodworth with his recollections of making the biggest deal of his life when he was just 35 years old.
I scraped up everything that I could. My house was free and clear. I mortgaged my house, and I saved some bonds, and I cashed those in. And I went to the bank and personally borrowed as much money as I could. And John did the same thing. Then we sat down with Harry Stone probably 7 or 8 times in Cleveland. So we finally nailed down the deal, and the Woodworth family took over control of the knitting mill. That was in '52.
Much of the work in the 1950s was taken up by cotton t-shirts and sweaters. This was followed by knitwear made up of wool, as well as more exotic materials. Remember the craze for alpaca sweaters? Here's Les Woodworth reflecting on the early 1960s.
In fact, I was responsible for buying almost 20% of the total alpaca yarn production in the world. You know how much alpaca goes into, you can imagine, goes into suits in Italy and in France and England. Well, we were 20% of the entire production was being consumed by the Winona Knitting Mill. So that was a major thing for us, and it was a great moneymaker. We made very good markup on it.
Many of the alpaca sweaters were sold through the Sears catalog, and a large part of the success of the mill through the 60s was based on the relationship with Sears. As the contracts with Sears grew, so did the Winona Knitting Mills. The third generation of the Woodworth family entered the scene in 1973, when Les's sons Pete and Pat returned from their service in the Navy. Pat took over the retail end of the business while Pete headed into manufacturing, and he became president of the Winona Knitting Mills in 1983. Walker's grandsons retained the legacy that has become the hallmark of the Winona Knitting Mills. Pete and Pat learned at an early age to deal honestly with the people around you, work hard, and produce the best garment you can. The last decade has seen a tremendous change in the buying habits of the American public. Imports of all kinds, from cars to computers to cameras, have flooded the American market. The clothing industry is no different. Today, almost 70% of the clothing sold in the U.S. is made in the Orient. The Winona Knitting Mills anticipated this import challenge and underwent a market shift in the mid-1970s. The idea was to produce a garment using only natural fibers and to always ship it on time. This expanded commitment to quality and service allowed the mill to knit sweaters for a wider variety of specialty customers. L.L. Bean, Izod, Pendleton, Land's End, and Cabela's are but a few of the companies that have come to count on the Winona Knitting Mills for an honest garment. These firms do business with WKM because they know their orders will be filled and their orders will be right. Here, John Woodworth talks about these values.
They got us started very early on with the idea that poor quality would not be tolerated, and we got introduced to the idea that you make the sweater and you make it right, and you give people the value that they deserve, and they'll come back.
Also, let's ask the president of the Winona Knitting Mills, Pete Woodworth, about the quality of the sweaters and service at WKM.
Always has been. I had nothing to do with the quality of this plant. When I came here, that was my father's and John's paramount concern, is that they made a quality garment. They always have. They treat a customer from the point of view that we'll do anything we can to make that garment the way you want it made. They've never given a customer a hard time about a return or an argument or a settlement. And they're unique in the industry. They always have been. They're the easiest mill to deal with, and we still are. And if you get to the garment from us, it'll be right.
The Winona Knitting Mills is involved in a number of different areas in the garment industry. When an airline needs sweaters for its flight attendants, they come to the Winona Knitting Mills because they know the quality, color, and fit will be better and more consistent than they are likely to find anywhere else. The Winona Knitting Mills makes over 50% of the nation's premium career apparel. Another division is the Signet Company. This is a custom embroidery division that will not only embroider on WKM sweaters, but will do contract work on other products. Finally, there is the Winona Knits Retail Company, with Pat Woodworth still as president. There is one of these stores adjacent to the WKM plant, as well as 20 additional stores in 5 states. The Winona Knitting Mills is a package knitting mill. This means that they do all the work necessary to turn ideas into good-looking sweaters for their customers. A design staff works with the customers to develop sweaters of classic line and proportion. Then prototypes are produced, samples are made, and orders are written. Then the production begins. But really, how does all this happen? It all comes back to the people. It was the good people of Winona that first attracted Walker Woodworth, and it's the same good people who make these beautiful sweaters. For almost 50 years, the Winona Knitting Mills has enjoyed an unusually good relationship with its people. Les, John, and Pete know better than anyone how much the success of the company depends on this talented, skilled, and dependable group of people. Here are their thoughts.
Well, the workforce here in Winona was what attracted my dad to locate here in the first place, because the people are so hardworking and they're very loyal, and they really want to do a day's work for a day's pay back in those days, and they still do.
Les and I both consider every person here a pretty good, friend and part of our family, like you said.
And the people around here, as far as running a business here, you couldn't ask for a better environment. People here are very hard-working people. They're very willing to contribute. They're well-educated. They think of the mill as their mill in a lot of respects. And some of these people have only been with us a month or two, but they're very willing to buy into that. They're a great group of people.
At the Winona Knitting Mills, the same values that Walker Woodworth brought with him in 1943 are the same values that work today: honesty, service, and respect for people. So, on that next cold morning in the Northland, when you reach for that favorite sweater, think about it as more than just a warm, beautifully made garment. Think about it in terms of people, the people of the Winona Knitting Mills.